So there's a team on dance, on music, on poetry, on skits, even on cooking. And they will use their passion to overcome their fears, which will make them more creative. And 14th of August every year, we have a big celebration, Freedom from Fears, on the eve of India's independence. They start leveraging their own strengths towards something which is bigger than themselves, then they will have developed this lifelong practice of sourcing enthusiasm. So therefore, we call it the practice of enthusiasm, through identifying your gifts, identifying your purpose, and learning how to leverage your gifts towards your purpose. Through that whole course that I teach, I personally teach that course on self-leadership. In that, this is a very important dimension that is discovered.
Dear listeners, I'm building up these episodes for you to have a great set of options to build an amazing and purpose-led 2021 and make it an astounding year. While the last episode was about unleashing potential, bringing you a two-part series titled Your Best Version. In this episode, you will hear from the foremost thought leader in the education sector, the virtues of ethical leadership, a roadmap to discovering one's purpose to build your best version. Without much further ado, our guest for this episode is Anil Sachdev. Anil Sachdev is a recognized thought leader in talent management, leadership development, and organizational transformation. He is a founder and CEO of the School of Inspired Leadership and a visiting faculty at many prestigious colleges across the globe, founder of Aisher Consulting, and currently the Dean of the School of Inspired Leadership. Anil decided to create Soil to provide management education with a focus on ethics, community partnership, sustainability, and other leadership aspects that the world today badly needs.
So, I feel very blessed. I was born in the family of an army officer. I was a fifth child, born at a place called Khadki near Pune. Had a very happy childhood. We lived in Avadi near Chennai for some time. Then we moved to Delhi. And there a few things happened which were life-changing moments for me. In the year 1959, my father met Swami Chinmayananda, a great spiritual teacher. And his entire life changed as a result of one talk given by Swamiji. In fact, he had gone to call his friend out of the talk from the modern school ground in Barakhamba Road in Delhi, and he was going to take him to the club because he felt he was wasting his time listening to a spiritual teacher. But little did he know that by entering that hall, something would happen to him. Because Swamiji was asking questions, who are you? And he said, who are you? I don't know what that question means. My name is so-and-so. I have so many children. This is what I have studied. This is my role in the army. So Swamiji's question said, I'm not asking what have you studied. I'm not asking whether you are married or children. I'm asking, who are you? And then he said, Swamiji was asking, why are you here? And he said, I'm here to pull my friend out of the stock. But he said, figuratively speaking, why are you in this planet? What have you been born for? And my father said, I've never asked these questions for the 44 years of my life. And then in that one evening, he became a person from an outer extrovert person, fond of his alcohol, cigarettes, eating meat, going to the club. He started his inner journey. And so we were very small children when we got exposed to Swami Chinmayananda and his teachings. And my parents used to conduct a class called the Balavihar class every day. Every Sunday we had this class with other children. And there were some stories told to us about our Indian culture. And at the end of the story, we were asked questions on, if you were in the place of that character, what would you have done?
Mm-hmm.
So very interesting way of storytelling. Both my father and mother were great storytellers. And by asking those questions, they became very thought-provoking in a way that from an early age, we got exposed to things, important aspects. For example, the most valuable thing in life is not a thing. It's something more intangible, just as an example. And then the Chinmaya Mission pledge, which used to talk about, we stand as one family, bound to each other with love and respect. We serve as an army, courageous and disciplined, ever ready to fight against all low tendencies and false values within and without us. We live honestly the noble life of sacrifice and service, producing more than what we consume and giving more than what we take. We believe that the service of our country is the service of the Lord of Lords, and devotion to the people is the devotion to the Supreme Self. We know our responsibilities give us the ability and courage to fulfill them. So every Sunday as children, we used to recite this. But, the importance of this, as I was growing older, I got to know. Then in 1962, India lost the war to China, and it was one of those watershed moments in our history. And I saw scenes, middle class family women removing all their jewelry and necklaces and donating to the Army Jawan Fund for the widows and children of the people who had been killed in action, the martyrs. And I saw that giving, and I saw so much of sadness in the country. And then my sister, who was in Miranda House, and she was studying in the there, and she was in the NCC as an under officer. That year at the Army Day parade, her duty was to serve Pandit Nehru, stand next to him, give him tea, coffee, etc. And Lata Mangeshkar ji sang that song for the first time. "Ae mere watan ke logo zara aankh mein bhar lo pani." And my sister is an amazing singer. So that night at the dinner table, she came and narrated the story and sang that song. And it
Mm-hmm.
was such a powerful story. It impacted many of us. As a small 8-year-old child, I said, when I grow older, I would like to do something to remove the tears from our leaders in the eyes. I want to do something to serve my country. I didn't know what. As I got older, in 1971, the war came, and I wrote a play in Hindi and told the Film Institute people to act in that play. And we sold tickets and collected money to collect funds for the army Jawans. And we collected 5,000 rupees, and I thought that was the most worthwhile thing I did in my life.
The best 5,000 rupees in your life.
Yes. And later on in college, Swamiji asked me, "So, what is the purpose of your life, young man?" So I wrote India's economic development based on good values. And I was troubled by the economic development, the stories I would hear from our American friends. And I said, we don't want our families to break up. We don't want teenagers becoming pregnant. We don't want people to be on drugs and LSD. But we want to have a holistic society, but we want to bring back that economic development in our country, which at one time we had. So that's how I decided to do my management studies. And then I joined Tata Motors, Telco, it was called at that time, which was a very large company. And I got selected because I shared my dreams even for my summer trainee interview with Telco, and they liked my dreams for my future. I worked there for a few years, but felt it was too big, so joined a company called Aisher, which I had heard of because one of my senior colleagues had joined the company, and it was the founder of that company was a role model, like a Gandhi in business. So I joined Mr. Vikram Lal and at a young age. And in the interview, I told him, "Sir, I'll work with you for 10 years and then I'll create a think tank and a consulting company that will transform Indian industry." He liked that very much. He hired me at a very young age as his head of corporate HR. Then he transferred me to the plant after a few years as head of manufacturing operations, then kept giving me more responsibilities, and the board appointed me on the board when I was 35 years old. And at that time, he asked me, "Do you still want to pursue your dream?" I said, "Yes." So he said, "Okay, why don't you make it a subsidiary of Aisher?" So we created a company called Aisher Consultancy. And the mission statement of that company was India's economic development without spiritual impoverishment. And, we did some wonderful work over the 10 years I was the CEO. And I had told the board after 10 years I will step down as the founder, which I did exactly after 10 years. Meanwhile, the company had become a very well established consulting company. And then I went to my next adventure. I said, I want to understand the power of the full potential of people and to really help India and Indian organizations to not only do the work we had done in ECS, but to now really understand what is human potential and talent. So created a company called Grow Talent, and with some very unique thinking about what is talent. That company became the largest HR consulting company in India because the whole vision was how to help people and organizations to realize their full potential, just like the earlier one was about India's economic development. And this became a very successful consulting firm. We grew every year 100%. And at the end of 6 years of growth, we found that we had become the largest in our space in India. That's when I told myself that now the time has come for me to get into the field of education. I had promised myself when I enter my 50s, I will start investing in education of the young leaders in the country so that they can take these ideas we had practiced in Aisha Consulting and Grow Talent and now they could have a whole new worldview with which they could impact businesses in a significant way. So that's how the School of Inspired Leadership was born. And so it's very, very, very interesting as to how this whole journey has been. I'm feel very blessed to be given this opportunity to serve. And I met my wife when I was just in college in my masters, and we've been together for a long time. And I've got a wonderful family, my son, my daughter, now my three grandchildren. So it's been a wonderful,
Nice.
wonderful life I have been given. So this is the story of my life.
Fantastic. Couldn't have been a better background, better start to this conversation. I think you truly have kind of lived up to every commitments that you made to yourself in making the economic impact, in making the educational impact, and kind of nurturing talent along the journey. So hats off, and again, very grateful for you taking time and joining me in this conversation. Again, continuing with your journey, Anil, soil was a great experiment, right? I think you always had this vision of doing something, the next big thing, and you kind of went about doing that. And soil is one such thing, and very, very relevant in the current state and age that we are in. Tell us a bit more about why you jumped into this and what is soil currently up to, and what is your vision for soil?
I used to feel that businesses have a profound power because, if you look at the power of businesses today, a handful of businesses control the world's GDP. A few entrepreneurs and business people now have their own disproportionate amount of wealth. And that wealth can be put to use to actually help the world in becoming better. So I believe that businesses have tremendous power of doing good in the society. Workplaces in which we spend more time of our waking hours at work. These days, we work from home. And, so work has become the most important force in our lives. And therefore, the way workplaces lead themselves has a profound impact on the culture of our time. The state of our planet is because of the way we adopt certain ways of working and ways of governing workplaces. And I thought that workplaces and businesses for a long time were excessively focused on this idea born out of the free market, which is of shareholder value creation. And they had lost the plot because shareholder value creation is the reward you get for serving society. If you forget that your basic purpose is serving society and you only look at shareholder value maximization, you may create businesses which could possibly be toxic for the planet because you can make lots of money in this world by doing things which are not good for the well-being of the planet. So the practices we adopt, the products that we make, the services we provide, are we strengthening the well-being of all? Are we taking responsibility for the way we live now? And when I was reflecting on this, when I was had just become a head of Aisha Consultancy and a company that we co-founded in 1991. In 93, I got a call from the chairman of IIM Ahmedabad Board of Governors, Mr. S.D. Kulkarni, who was the MD of Larsen and Toubro. And L&T was our big client with whom we were doing a lot of work, and they liked our work a lot. So Mr. Kulkarni said, Anil, we want to improve IIM Ahmedabad. Would you accept the directorship of the IIM Ahmedabad? So I said, I'm 39 years old. I'm just setting up this consulting company. And why would you want to hire me? He said, no, we want good leadership there because, people teach management, but we don't practice good leadership. And the same year, also got a call from the IIM Bangalore board wanting me to be considered for the directorship of IIM Bangalore. I did not take that process and discussion further because although I was touched by their gesture to approach this complete non-academic person, although I must say I had started teaching in business schools even when I was a young man. I used to go to the United States in the summers and be adjunct faculty to some of the business schools there. I enjoyed doing that. I liked the meritocracy and the culture of the US business schools. Many of them, had very high quality research and academics, and I liked that. But I said, no, this would not be fair to the dream of setting up Aisha Consultancy. So I turned. But I had promised myself one day when the timing is right, I will enter the field of education. So these were my thoughts that the business is now becoming like this. And We needed to completely make a new experiment where a graduate passing out of a business school will take the responsibility for serving the well-being of all. That means, I had this interesting story. Some of the young Yuvak Kendra students of Chinmaya Mission, they would go and join, let's say, an IIM Ahmedabad later, but they would come and share with me stories that, we learned all these good values thanks to the our upbringing in our parents and thanks to what we were taught in Chinmaya Mission. But here in the professor in our institute says to us that, these values are very nice at home, but at workplaces are very different. It's very difficult to practice honesty, integrity in India. The most powerful businessmen are those who actually have the right connections. And remember, these were the stories of the 90s where there were some businessmen with some connections were growing much faster than others. So I told myself, if the IIM professor or these top business school professors cannot develop good values, at least they have no right to destroy the good values of students whom their parents and the Chinmaya Mission has built.
Right.
So for me, it was important that business school education must have a very strong component on character and values and leading yourself before you earn the right to lead others and lead businesses. So a very significant part of our curriculum is what we call the practice of being, which is leadership of self, meaning how do you lead your own physical bodies, your emotional self, your intellectual self, and how do you source inspiration from yourself, from your inner witness, that inner power inside each person, which is a source of tremendous inspiration. So how can you source inspiration that is present inside you? So we developed a whole new curriculum for soil based on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the 5 layers. So we say for the Anandamayakosha, which is the deepest level of that experience of being in yoga. That means pure self awareness and awareness, pure peace, pure harmony. The way to invoke that has to have a curriculum on practice of mindfulness and through meditation and yoga and pranayama. So we have a amazing curriculum in that area, which we were very fortunate to get a amazing woman who's lived all over the world, American by citizenship, but having spent 30 years in India. And they were referring a book by her yoga teacher called Chup Sadhana, which is written by a Muslim scholar called Manzoor, a Muslim who had studied Vedant, who wrote a book called Chup Sadhana.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our book and curriculum for the practice of silence and mindfulness and meditation. Because if you can learn this to source from your inner silence, then you can learn to take on any significant aspect because that is the source of all great learning. So this is the first thing we focused on. Then we said, when you are really developing this ability to source silence, then you will develop the subtle power of discernment. It will be clear to you on how you must take the right decision. The power of your intellect will begin to shine when you can do this. So we said we must have a curriculum on making decisions which serve the well-being of all. And so we said that is what we defined as ethics. We said you have customer, shareholder, employee, community, and the planet, 5 stakeholders. And decision making we must teach to our students from a whole systems perspective, not just one perspective, and that they should do through exploring the value related dilemmas that they have inside them. Because only then they will be able to make the right ethical decisions. Because when it comes to making decisions, very often we choose a frame that makes compromises because we don't have the capacity to challenge our own selves and to explore our values, that if the values are really of this kind, then we should take decisions. So we had appointed top theater artists like Lucian Dubé and asked them to run a unique 30-hour course over 5 intense days on helping students to explore ethical dilemmas in themselves so that the power of their intellect could shine and they could learn how to take the right decisions based on embracing the power of their values. So therefore we defined that curriculum. So this is the Vijnanamayakosha or the Gnamayakosha. That ultimately the role of intellect is to take the right decisions which are fair to all. Then the third aspect we said that, okay, if this is important, but to make sure that these decisions are created in the well-being of all, you have to really build trust and partnership with every stakeholder, which means it's so important for you to invoke your emotional intelligence to develop the sense of empathy and compassion, because without compassion, none of this will actually happen. So we developed a whole curriculum on compassion, and in fact, that is the heart of our program. We have almost 300 hours of curriculum out of our 1 year program only based on compassion, because we encourage our students to work 1 day in a week with NGOs on what we call the social innovation program. Because when they learn to empathize with people like the homeless, or like the ones who are the poorest of the poor, or people who are in a context afflicted by some disabilities, then there are so many good NGOs in Gurgaon whom we work with. And this makes our students develop that emotional intelligence, makes them relate to people who are not like themselves, makes them understand their context and develop that sense of empathy, and then doing something about it through the practice of compassion. And we learned that this has to be a weekly practice, because some other schools send people to a 4 weeks of internships on some social context. But, people come back and then it's kind of over after some time. But we said, and I learned this somewhere early in my life, that a regular weekly practice of something makes it a virtuous habit. So that's why we have a weekly practice on compassion. And then we said, okay, so this is the Manomayakosha of Patanjali.
The
Then we said
compassion bit of it.
the compassion from the Manomayakosha. Now we said, now the emotional mind, when you go after that, then the question is, this will not be effective till you basically learn to listen and communicate across differences, across biases. So you have to learn to communicate and not allow your own biases to impact the quality of your listening or the quality of what you are communicating. So we therefore said, in addition to pranayama that helps us to look at the leadership of the breath, so in the Pranamayakosha, there is a whole curriculum around communication well-being, which is both through pranayama as well as through understanding that biases happen because we are not diverse and inclusive in our ways of being. Therefore, the practice of diversity. So the
So you're
whole
bringing in the element of diversity within the curriculum,
that's
diversity of thought
yes.
and practices.
Yes. And by also emphasizing diversity in the way we select our students, because analytical intelligence is overrated. That is necessary but not enough. So, in addition to what the CAT or GMAT measures, which is analytical intelligence, we have our tools which measure creativity, which measure empathy, which measure resilience, and which measure agility. So, those other dimensions which are as important as analytical ability. So, we have tests specially developed to measure this, that we work with a psychometric firm that help us to do that. So that test is necessary over and above whatever GMAT, CAT, or whatever you may have taken. And our whole talent appreciation interview for admission is based on understanding the uniqueness of each person and the power of their own dreams, what they are inspired to do. What would they like to do if we give them a platform of soil? What is it that they are, rather than just simply get a job? I mean, even if they are wanting to join a company and get a job, very good, that's the starting point. But what would they like to contribute? What is it that they deeply care about? What are the values that they would like to express at work? So we do a 1 hour interview for admission, which is based on the talent appreciation process, as we call it, to get to discover each uniqueness of each person. And we also we practice multiple intelligence model in the way we do our pedagogy. Some people learn through, lecture methods. Some people learn through dialogue and group discussion and simulations. But some people learn through other creative ways. So, for example, in our self-leadership class, we expose them to understanding why they are not being creative enough, and how they can improve their creativity by invoking some of their passion. So there's a team on dance, on music, on poetry, on skits, even on cooking. And they will use their passion to overcome their fears, which will make them more creative. And 14th of August every year, we have a big celebration, Freedom from Fears, on the eve of India's independence. If I show you the recording of the Freedom of Fear, because this year it was a digital affair, but if you see that, you will be very inspired by what the students came out with. So, that whole methodology of doing that is so wonderful. Lastly, Patanjali talks about Annamayakosha, which is that you should, what Swami Chinmayananda taught us, produce more than what we consume and give more than what we take. So that is what we call the practice of sustainability. And there we have a boot camp every year where we look at some problem or a challenge society is facing, like air pollution, for example, or transportation, for example, a significant challenge around us. The students work on, and we teach them this whole design thinking as a way to take decisions which are invoking sustainability. So there's a boot camp on sustainability that is held every year. And typically, one of the interesting companies sponsors that boot camp so that they can pose a problem that the society is facing, and our students work in teams to invoke that. So then they learn the practice of how to do more with less for the benefit of more people through these tools on design thinking, which is done on sustainability. So this is the unique curriculum called character. This whole thing, the 5 aspects of the Yoga Shastra of Patanjali. And for every aspect of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we have got a curriculum designed for that. So which is what gives the uniqueness and the power to us. And then there is a course that we say on how to source enthusiasm. So in enthusiasm, in that whole journey, we ask students to understand their strengths, also encourage them to start asking questions of their purpose. Many of them don't have that understanding, but we say, okay, keep on asking questions around what matters most to you. What are you inspired to do in life? And we encourage them to identify something bigger than themselves, so that if they start leveraging their own strengths towards something which is bigger than themselves, then they will have developed this lifelong practice of sourcing enthusiasm. So therefore, we call it the practice of enthusiasm, through identifying your gifts, identifying your purpose, and learning how to leverage your gifts towards your purpose. Through that whole course that I teach, I personally teach that course on self-leadership. In that, this is a very important dimension that is discovered. So this is the whole self-knowledge, which makes you enthusiastic. And the third dimension is competence, which is where most good business schools focus. We also do that. That what is the industry looking for in terms of digital, in terms of analytics, in terms of the way they want you to study finance, marketing, human resources, technology, operations. So there we teach students how to think in a holistic way, and of course do all the courses that are desired in a business education or management education. So they have the technical and functional skills that they can do. But that is 40% of our curriculum. 20% is on this enthusiasm, and 40% is on character, because we believe that if the practice of character is there, then so sometimes there are critics of our program saying, why do you focus so much on these values and character building? Why don't you instead do more on technical and functional skills? Our approach is saying, no, if you can only inspire people to source inspiration and learn how to learn, they will acquire the technical and functional skills over time. But we should use this in a way where we are developing that inner capacity in them, so they will do.
So you're giving the tools for people to succeed in life, not just in the workforce.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So very aptly, that's why it's called as School of Inspired Leadership. That's a full form for SOIL. And I envy the fact that you're having this school set up so late that many of us have done with our education, and now we are kind of looking at something unique like this and saying, why did we not have when we were growing up?
Yes, and for senior leaders, we run something called the Global Leadership Program, in which we also have some of this curriculum. And in some of our other executive education, we provide that. But yes, thank you for saying.
So, Anil, that's wonderful to know about SOIL, the whole impact and genesis around what it is. And one other piece that you are very, very successful doing over the last few years is running this series called as Becoming the Best Version of Yourself.
Yes.
And I want to split it into 2 parts. Part 1 is from the series that you have done so far, what are the top 3 or 5 observations, learnings that you've had by kind of interacting with these leaders? And the second part is, as we are focusing, and this is an appropriate time as we are kind of coming towards the end of this calendar year and seeing the next year with a lot more hope and vigor, how can one develop being the best version of themselves? That's the end of part 1 of this 2-part series. There are parallels that one can draw to the curriculum of soil management program and the focus on ethics, community partnership, sustainability, and other leadership aspects the world today badly needs. Make sure to come back to listen to part 2 of this episode, where Anil talks about being the best version and the tools to make this change. I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation, and do drop me a note with your comments. Until next time, keep inspiring.